what we're going to talk about is the future of content creation. So let's dive straight into it. I've asked or talked with quite a lot of kind of experts in the AI area, and they all say graphic artists will be the first to go.
Mindblowers, uncovering the mysteries of the future. This episode, how AI is transforming the future of video and graphic design, with Wade McMaster and your host, Daniel Kafer.
And you actually are a graphic artist. So try to tell me a little bit about, or tell our listeners a little bit about your background and where you see graphic design going in terms of AI.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start from the start and work our way into the future, if that makes sense. So from my perspective as a graphic designer, I started, essentially, I wanted to be a web designer more than anything when I was in school, but I kept on getting in this position where, as I was working on my skills in high school, and I actually did a diploma in multimedia. I didn't actually get formal qualifications in graphic design, but I kept getting offered graphic design jobs because people would see my work and they'd say, "Hey, we've got a job for you." And I live in a very small area of Australia. I live just north of Brisbane in the Fraser Coast near Hervey Bay. So graphic design jobs weren't exactly, there weren't a lot of them. Web design jobs were almost none. So I got into that industry and I sort of found that I did like it. So I did graphic design primarily in a graphic design agency, and then also a lot of that was print focused. But as social media started to kick in, a lot more of that started to take over. So I spent a good 20 years doing graphic design full time, and it was around that 20-year mark that that Midjourney kicked off, and it got really popular a few years ago, and that sort of really caught my interest. I had a good friend who was also very artistic, and he's been a professional artist, that kind of thing, and we sort of back and forth on that a fair bit. So the big thing for me was, as someone who at that point had been running his own design agency, or I say agency, it's a freelance business. I just run for myself at home. Agency makes me feel like I've got like a bunch of subordinates, which I don't. But to me, I saw it as an opportunity to work a lot faster, to get more unique imagery into my designs, not as a replacement for it. And I always found it funny when people say that graphic designers are the first to go. I feel like there's some truth in that, but also not really, because I know a lot of graphic designers who are still in the industry who just cannot keep up with the workload. I feel like, if anything, it's going to enable people to turn out to do more work quicker and apply their expertise as time goes on, and as AI develops. They'll probably apply their expertise in a more supervisory sort of fashion. At the moment, you still have to have your hands on the tools, so to speak, and inject certain bits of AI into it. But the world needs more and more graphic design. It doesn't need less. So if anything, AI in the world of graphic design and art is only going to empower people to do more, even if it's for themselves. But there's always going to be the need for professionals, because people don't want to spend the time doing graphic design. They want to delegate.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a conversation with David Shapiro. I don't know if you know him, but he's kind of I think he calls himself an AI philosopher. But he mentioned an example where he had written a book and he had like a graphic designer do the work, and it was like $1,000 or something like that. But then actually, because of the AI tools, when he did another book, he could do it himself, and the audience actually appreciated it just as much. So do you think maybe there will be plenty of work, but the type of clients and the type of work will change?
I do think so, yeah. I think, because I can see what you're saying, especially like if you've got someone who has a vision and they know what they want, then the AI enables them to do that and cut the designer out. So I do think there are definitely going to be areas in that industry where people are going to be getting less work. But and I live in a small town. I'm not in a big city. I didn't deal with a lot of massive businesses, but people were so busy. They're just like, I don't want to handle this. I want to pass it on. And I still don't see them sitting down and sit with AI and actually, creating the designs themselves. So I really do think that, especially in the social media age where people are trying to create posts all the time to promote things, to promote events and sales, I think it's definitely going to probably shift more into the busier realm of things. Whereas I know back in the days when I was working with graphic design in print, you had a lot of people who probably had the time to do that, but didn't know how to do it. And I think those people will probably be inclined to turn to AI. But the busier people will still probably we want someone to delegate. And if anything, it might be simply a role someone does as a staff member at a business. But the other thing too is when you're talking about there's levels to everything. There's people who can use Photoshop and AI, but there are people who understand what good design is and the hierarchy of design and how it's supposed to grab people's attention and educate them and actually sell something if that's the purpose of the design. So I do think it will shift. I do agree it will shift, but I don't see graphic designers running out of work as much as the nature of it changing to sort of, to validate what you said. I think you're right there. The clients might change.
I also guess there's a point too that it's actually really important getting this right. I mean, if I look to myself, for example, I help companies optimize advertising on YouTube and Meta platforms and so on. And it was like the devil was in the detail, right? And if you had the right intro, they could make a lot of money on the ad. And if it didn't really grab the attention, it wouldn't work, right? For example, doing my own YouTube videos, it's slightly different advice I need to give myself, right? What I taught them about advertising doesn't necessarily work for like these type of podcast music videos. So I think there's so much value in the final 25%, you can say, and maybe that is what we'll see in the future as well.
Yeah, I feel like that the best graphic designers in the world, the people who get the results, and it's probably the same in any industry. Their skill set is not just the ability to be a good craftsman. It becomes the ability to take the pieces on the table and arrange them in a way where it works best. And it's going to be, I mean, there might be a time in the future where AI can do that for us. But even then, that's a hard future to predict. But I still see there's going to be some difference. People might not know what they're asking for. So, but yeah, I agree that top 25% is going to be it's going to be different in the sense that they're going to be relying on these tools to get jobs done quicker, to implement their visions quicker, and the results will still be the same as compared to an amateur who's still learning just the basics, so to speak.
Yeah, so the question is, will the future be like that you could tell AI what you actually want to achieve? So basically say, okay, I do have a product, I want to sell it. Tell me how to sell it, and then it could do the whole process for you, right? And I guess it's that question, or it's that level of AI that I know people are fearing, because then they would say, okay, now I'm caught out, right? I mean, if you're an ad agency or a media agency, you're kind of seeing that whole value chain disappear. But I think we're still pretty far from that.
I agree. I do think we are far from it. And I will admit that is a bit of an area that it's hard to sort of tell what's going to happen there, because there are the people who will say, there will always be the people who do like that human touch, but that's not the bulk of the industry. There are people who just want the product. They want to get things sorted so they can get it into their system and move on. But I do feel like it's not that far-fetched to sort of say, well, we've got ChatGPT at the moment. You can have a conversation with it, and now it can generate images of DALL-E. There's not a lot of connections there left over to really be made. It just has to evolve to that point really now, doesn't it? So all the tools are kind of already on that path. So I still think that there's, even from a consulting perspective, I think maybe graphic designers will have to start turning into marketers, or maybe the skill sets have to be more broad. But the industry will definitely change. But I also think it's hard to see, but I do think there will be more opportunities popping up out of that as well. I think what you'll see is more output as opposed to less people working, just because that just seems to be the trend. In the past, anytime something has come out and streamlined a process, we've seen more output as opposed to less people working. So, and by the way, I'm not someone who's studied the statistics thoroughly. I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong on that.
Can you walk the audience through like a typical piece of work that you would accept, and then kind of what type of tools you would use, and how would that look different today to like maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
To be honest, it's my outlook is much the same as it would be normally if someone gets a job. Let's take a simple example to try and put the process together, I guess, is someone says to me, I need some designs up for an event. I actually do a lot of event flyers, or at least I used to, for like martial arts clubs and things like that, because it was a community I was involved in. So they would have a big event and they'd say, we need like an A4 flyer, we need a social media image and things like that. And I would generally start with one design and move on. But what I tend to do then now, in the past, I would lay out the pieces that I think need to go on there and go, cool, I need something that's going to grab attention. Maybe it's the name of the event, what you're going to get, the information, call to action, and an image that's going to grab attention. And there might be some other design elements in there, like maybe something to do with the background or something to do with a few just visual elements on the design. I would spend a lot of time either creating those elements or sourcing them, whereas now I lay the pieces out. I put all that text and elements there as I need to. I might get a photo in there, but these days, the AI, I'm able to go, well, I'm looking for an element like this or like that, and I go and generate an element, and I go, I like this one. I pick the one I like, the one I think is going to work best for the design, and I'll put that one in. So if anything, it's really, the process itself is not hugely different, but the speed that I can pull it off with the uniqueness is. And if something, especially in this current stage, looks a little too AI, I can make some small edits to it because I have the existing skill set. So that's kind of what my process looks like now. Whereas, in the future, it might be a case of giving an AI the elements and it arranging it. And then it might be a case of just giving the AI the basic message and it'll come up with the elements and everything as that sort of intelligence evolves in the future. So that would be how I look at a basic graphic design using AI. It would be how I use the AI to create various pieces and elements to more quickly put the design together. Sometimes I will actually even just feed the whole design into Midjourney or something like that for inspiration, though. Just go, I like that effect, and I might sort of piggyback that if I'm having trouble coming up with something. So, but ultimately, it's a part of an existing process, if that makes sense.
Do you think AI is to some extent replacing stock photo? So if you would in the past have said, okay, I need a small microphone in this picture, and you would have found it there, and now you just ask AI for it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, one big part, part of my process was sometimes I would go looking for stock photos or even stock textures, and now I just prompt for it. So I do think the stock photo industry definitely would take a hit in that sense. So it's one of those things where at the moment, sometimes AI is better at producing a stock asset than taking a photograph, but then there's the other side of things where a photograph is obviously a lot better. So, but yeah, eventually it's going to slowly eat that up, I think, simply because when you're talking about AI art specifically, it's pretty much just a source of imagery. And when you've got one source of imagery over here and another one coming up that's more convenient, I think it's going to eventually step up and eat into that existing source because you're just talking about images. Don't get me wrong, there's an artistry to the images. And again, the people who have the skill in knowing what sells in stock photography and how to take the better photos are probably the people who are best suited to creating the images with AI that are going to sell better. So I do think there's always that crossover. Knowledge always helps. So there's always a skill set to it. But yeah, definitely the source I think could change just simply because of the ease in which you can create the images.
Do you see a move from photo to video in general? I mean, I know it's not a new thing, but do you see that evolution continuing?
Yeah, I was blown away by AI video when they first started coming out. I remember thinking like it looks pretty bad, and I think it would take a long time because in my mind I'm not someone who if you said to me I'm here to develop an AI, I'm a user of AI, but I have no idea how they actually tend to use AI to create video, because creating an image, the amount of time, it was very quick to get good at creating images, but the amount of details it takes to develop an image, when you start adding movement to that, I remember thinking like this will take years. But already the video side of things has hit a pretty amazing level. Like even just consumer level, you can head to Runway and upload an image and create a pretty convincing video for 5 to 10 seconds. And so, yeah, I do think video is going to cop it as well. I do also believe, though, just it's a bit of a sidetrack, but it works for images and video, that there's still going to be that if someone has a photo of, say, the Eiffel Tower, the photo of the actual thing. There's something about that as well that's also going to keep it alive. But if you're talking about basic objects, like you want a picture of a bird doing something, then if the AI can produce it by you typing a little bit into a keyboard with a prompt, it's definitely going to overtake, just for convenience and the fact you don't have to do so much work by going out with the camera and finding a bird and trying to get it to do what it is you want to do, So I do think, I think media in general, AI is going to be steamrolling through over the next decade or two at least. So.
But how much do you actually think the tools are improving? I mean, I've been using Midjourney, I guess, for about 1.5 years or something like that. And I can see it improving, but I don't have kind of a clear way to measure, I mean, how much better it is today than it was, a year ago, for example. And a little bit the same with Runway. I mean, I can see it's getting better, but sometimes I still, and my friends, when they work with it, get disappointed. They're like, well, now it's doing something it was, I could forgive it for a year ago, but hey, this is not good enough. But do you see it, like, when you work on a daily basis, improvement?
Yeah, I would say I see it in stages, but I will say one thing too, just to go back to what you just said before, and just kind of helps support that point. At the end of the day, it's still a bit of a gamble, isn't it? Because that's the difference between someone who is in control of creating something, whether it's drawing, painting, using Photoshop, or lining something up with the camera, is there's a lot more control in doing it yourself than trying to tell the AI. I always say I've got a few videos and that where I've mentioned talking to AI. It's trying to improve your communication with someone who's like a freelancer in that field. Except the AI, you have to be very particular about your communication and understand the AI a bit better. So the ability to communicate to get the result you want, you still don't always get it. So I feel like that is, if you are going in with I need an image and you're not particularly concerned about the exactness of it, it's great. But if you know exactly what you want, sometimes getting exactly what you want can seem almost impossible. You feel like you've just about got it and you make a little tweak and it doesn't quite turn out that way. But in regards to the improvement of that, I do feel like I find it can be just as difficult to get what you want. But when I first started using Midjourney, for instance, there was version 3 where if you did a face, there was no way you can get a human face that looked like a human face. And then when they came up with version 4, all of a sudden, these look like proper illustrated faces with, the details of the nose and the eyes all actually started to look pretty good. And then as I feel like they've smoothed it out to a point now where you're looking at the small details, like the images a few versions ago looked like proper images, but if you zoom in the details, there were oddities in there, and now the oddities are starting to shrink out. So in regard to how it's improved, that's how I've seen it, especially as a visual person. That's how I've seen Midjourney improve over time, is the overall quality, then the finer details. And I think there's still probably some little bits and pieces there, like artistic choices that I probably haven't picked up on. And then, of course, I think video will follow a similar trend, except you've got the added patterns of movement, where every now and then it'll have someone and then they'll just morph into something else. I think you'll see that become less and less, obviously, visual details. And whereas I know that back about even 12 months ago or 18 months ago, video it looked like a small GIF and it was just looked completely unreal and the movement was a bit all over the place, or it'd be so minor that the person would just kind of move a little bit and that would be the video. So I do think that I think the idea is trying to understand what they're trying to achieve. Like in images, you've got coherence, how the image looks at is, and then you've got the details, the artistic choices, and then you add those same elements to video. You add things like motion, speed of motion, and I guess the idea is trying to look at those metrics or those things individually with each bit of media, and you can see it improve over time. I think that it's getting to a point now where the details that are improving are finer and probably harder to spot, though.
Do you think the skill set that you need as a graphic designer or as a video creator is changing? I mean, for example, I was thinking if you had a hard time explaining in words what you needed, but you kind of had a feel and then you could create it, right? if you have that problem, you have a problem, you have an issue today, right? But on the other hand, if I want Salvador Dali, a clock like Salvador Dali, for example, it would know exactly how to do that in Midjourney. And if you then say a photography style like Newton, for example, again, right, it would be able to create that. But if you don't know the words and the artists, then I guess you would be struggling.
Yeah, and that's why, and it's that kind of reasoning too that I feel is one of the reasons why I don't think AI would completely wipe out those skill sets, because anytime someone creates something new that is just a step above or an innovation in the right direction, AI, I guess it could probably innovate accidentally, but in regards to purposeful innovation where someone goes, I don't see anyone doing this, and they make it happen because it's in their head, I think human innovation is going to be something that's still going to be around for a long time. And I agree with you. If you can't put it into words and you can't get the AI to create it, making it yourself, that's where the skill and control factor comes in. Like, I've been using Photoshop now for 25 years, and I know that if I get an image in Midjourney and there's something in it that I really want to see and I just can't get it, is I'll just take it into Photoshop and make it happen. So, and as a guy who teaches AI, like, I think, okay, I need to solve this problem because I really want to teach my audience how to deal with that. And the tools are coming out for it. But yeah, I do think that there's a human creation element that AI is trained primarily off of existing human creation. So it can be hard to come up with something new unless you can kind of take those existing elements and mash them together in a unique way. Like, one thing I tried, this isn't super unique, but I tried ukiyo-e art, and I added 3D render into it to create a 3D render of ukiyo-e art in Midjourney once, and I really liked the results. So you could say that's somewhat unique. It's not that unique, but as a unique idea on a small personal level, AI was able to do that because I could take two existing elements and put them together. But you don't always have the existing elements, do you? So I feel like that's where the human skill and ingenuity comes in.
So what do you think, if we could kind of go into the future, let's say 4 or 5 years, and look at what the tools would be able to do then, where would you anticipate, the wow being? I mean, for example, I would think that in terms of photo generation, I'm thinking that the curve is now, at the slower end. But with video, maybe it's the opposite. It's still kind of exponential.
Yeah, I think that because of the added layer of movement, video will always just have that little bit of a lag behind. But I think otherwise, if you look at the progression, it's probably going to be similar, just delayed for video. And I feel like, yeah, image generation is getting pretty close. And then the next step will probably be trying to generate at a higher resolution for one. I know we can do AI upscales, but generating at higher and higher resolutions, I think, is going to be one thing. But I don't think that'll be the main thing. I think that, like I said before, as the details get better, the speed will probably be one of the biggest factors. And then adding in layers of control. So being able to say, at the moment, you generate an image, you sit back and a couple of minutes or a minute or so, you've got the image. But maybe in the future, you type in the prompt, hit OK, and the image pops up straight away. And then you edit the prompt and maybe the image changes live, like getting to that level where you're going, okay, cool, I need to make some alterations to this image. The AI being able to compute those changes in a live fashion. And also, again, like I said, with certain controls, maybe you can talk to it and say, well, make the chin a bit bigger or make the nose a bit longer, and maybe you're able to adjust it in a quicker fashion. I feel like the level of control will probably go up after the quality has been hit at a certain level. And then you'll be able to go, cool, generate a man in a business suit. You go, well, actually, I wanted a blonde man. There we go. Now he's blonde. I wanted a mustache. I wanted the curls on the end. I actually wanted his shoulders to be a bit wider. And then as you're saying it and typing it in, it's just happening. I feel like that's probably the end game where it becomes a tool. Almost, if you went back 50 years and showed it to someone, they'd think it was witchcraft, basically. But I feel like that seems a bit magical. But I feel like if you're in the AI space, you can see how it would become a reality, especially as processing power increases. Even what we're doing at the moment could reach that, in 10 years, if computers and, graphics cards are that much better, the speed might be at that point where it's just a matter of implementing the controls. So I do think there's only so far you can go with quality, but then the ability to communicate with the person and make things happen quicker is definitely going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, so I guess what could really impress people would be like talking to your Midjourney, right? So I think one of the annoying things is you get an image, you kind of like it, but if you're not super skilled in Photoshop or something like that, then you say, well, give him a white beard instead of a black one. And then suddenly the guy looks completely different, right? And you're like, no, I want the first guy with the black beard, right? But also just having it like a conversation, right? Then saying, okay, now we got the beard. Now I need the ears a little bigger. And now I need, the way he or she stands a little bit different. I guess those things would make it a lot quicker, right, to get to the results you want. Was that something you're already able to do because you know how to prompt these tools, or?
I would say, yeah, actually, across multiple tools, because a lot of these platforms are getting very similar tool sets. A lot, like, as you know, like Stable Diffusion, obviously you can generate images, and then obviously you got things like face swapping tools, and you got things like in painting. So in painting is a good one where you go, well, I want the beard to be a bit bigger, so you can in paint. And with the pose, you got Control Net where you can upload a photo of someone doing a pose, and it'll scan that, copy the pose, and sort of replicate it to the best of its ability. Sometimes it can get the 3D space a bit funny, but most of the time it's pretty good. I feel like those tools are all there, and they're all in separate little pockets too. Well, not all of them, but some of them are sort of put together with the image generator, whereas the face swap is kind of like its own little tool where you'll send the image across. So you're kind of sending it from place to place sometimes, whereas I feel like it'll all come into one. It might be the case of when you've got a beard and you go, I want to increase the length of the beard or something like that. It might be easier to really pinpoint the exact length. There might be a simple case of going, I want the beard to be bigger, and then you might be able to simply grab a slider or something like that. So I definitely feel like there's a lot of potential for those tools to really take off and get to that level. Just simply because of the fact that when the processing power is high enough, it can juggle a lot more data and it has probably a lot more training in the data sets too by then. So I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent a little bit.
What would be the wow factor if we could morph 5 years ahead would be the way we interact with the tools? Not that it's like 20K in resolution. It's more like we could just talk to the tools and they could make the adjustments in a seamless way. So you don't have to take the picture over to Photoshop, then you take it to let's say Runway to animate it, but it's much more seamless.
Yeah, well, I think if you had this kind of almost unlimited power of AI when it comes to media like images and video, all of a sudden things are a lot quicker to do, but then the field kind of resets, and then the people with the artistic vision create the better projects again, don't they? Because like you said, the influence in going, well, this is what I imagine, I need the AI to create it, as opposed to creating it yourself. The unique vision is still what creates the unique video or asset, isn't it? So I do feel like at the end of the day, and I know I've said this to you before we were recording, that while I think AI is amazing for everyone and people's skill sets, like it's awesome, but the people with the skill sets using AI, combining skill sets for one is excellent, but also the understanding of, having good ideas and good vision will be such a big thing, because eventually it'll probably get to the point where these AI tools, you probably won't even call them AI anymore. You'll just call them an image generator. I feel like the buzz around the word AI probably won't even mean much. It's like we don't say, computer powered calculators anymore or computer powered phones anymore. We just say it's a phone. So yeah, I do feel like it's just going to hit a point where it's just the norm, and then we'll go back to, the people with the vision create the better products. But also understanding, like, this would be better with a green tint. Like you look at The Matrix, they say that the film has a slight green tint to it. Just being able to say an artistic touch is give the parts in The Matrix a green tint. People have those little details they can add in. That'll really make the images just a bit better. Also, I just want to add too, there are people I've seen on Instagram who create images in Midjourney that I have no idea how they've created them. They look amazing, and they don't look like AI images, but they are made in Midjourney. And you pay to a paywall to get their process. But it just goes to show you, people are already doing unique things that other people are struggling to do in AI image generators as they are.
It is interesting, but I think you're spot on in terms of how the future is going to look in terms of how we communicate with these tools.